Hi guys, Fabio Palvelli here with the D2 conference. At D2, we believe in bringing you the right content for you to keep learning and keep growing in the field of archviz so that you as an artist can unlock your true creative potential. This is why we have designed the Inspiration series, a small collection of talks done to help you connect the creativity dots in and out of our professional field. If this is your first time here on our channel, hit that subscribe button, and if you like our videos, feel free to share them with your friends and colleagues. It will mean the world to us. This time, I have as a guest the one and only Allan McKay. With Allan, we touch up on the importance of social media and the personal branding. We talk about the first time he got in trouble as an artist, and we talk extensively about the importance of having ninja skills in the field of digital design. Great episode, and I cannot wait to hear your thoughts about it. 3, 2, 1, and we're recording. Allan, how are you, man?
Doing great, man. How you doing?
Thanks a lot for taking the time. I'm here with Allan McKay. I'm gonna try to make a very short introduction, but I don't know, probably people don't even need that because your work speaks for itself and your reputation precedes you. Allan McKay is an Emmy Award-winning visual effects supervisor and technical director. Allan has worked on many different movie titles: Avengers, Star Trek, Transformers, Superman, that's just to name a few, as well as many video games: Call of Duty, Halo, Destiny. Allan, you are the real deal. You have your own VFX studio based in Los Angeles, and you are an industry leader when it comes to education. Is this satisfactory enough for you?
I hope so. Yeah, no, thank you. I'm honored. It's weird because I'm usually the one interviewing other people, so it's odd hearing it all coming from me.
I wanted to say, because, I did a little bit of research and I wanted to, kind of like see you, how you react when under, the spotlight. And I was like, you do an incredible job at interviewing others. Actually, I'm extremely surprised by the quality of work that you do. And I'm surprised that at least, for the parameters that are of YouTube and stuff, that you don't have a bigger following. It's really beyond me why. But anyway, we'll dive into this.
No, thanks, man. Well, yeah, it is kind of interesting because it's, I definitely think that in a lot of ways I've always kind of made most of my content available on my email list, and it's only kind of really occurred to me recently, like, wow, like I'm putting out at least 100 hours a year of like video and books and all this other stuff, and I always want to reward people for taking action, and that's, rather than, I feel like otherwise everyone just kind of like clicks through stuff and goes about their day and doesn't really absorb it. So I want to kind of really build up a kind of that secret community of people who are just like diving into this stuff all day long. But it's only been recently that I'm like, wow, I probably should be doing what everyone else on the planet's doing now and doing all the YouTube and everything else. So it's, like next year is definitely something I want to lean into more.
You're going to shoot for 100,000 subscribers on YouTube.
And I was just chatting with Ryan Connolly the other day. I think he's got like 2 million or something. He's got at least 1 million people. And I've got a few friends who just hit like 100K. And it's just, Rath Grizzetti, a few other guys who are just absolutely crushing it. It's pretty mind-blowing to see that there is such a huge audience out there. Actually, I'll say, like, I was talking in Paris earlier this year on branding, and it was really cool. I had a blast. Like, I really put everything I could into this talk that I was giving, and everyone who came up afterwards, they're all concept artists, and they're like, Allan, like, that was really inspiring, and it was making me think I should really focus on building my brand and doing all these things. And I'd look at their followings, and they're like 300K people. It's like, I think you're doing pretty, everyone was like really high followings and seemed to be doing really well. So again, but that's exactly why you should leverage that and kind of build on it. So yeah, everyone's doing so amazing.
Yeah, you're totally right, and I understand what you're saying. But anyway, Allan, you have quite a story to share with me, and I don't know how you're set on time. Usually I try to make these videos 40 minutes or less, but in my experience, we never manage. We always go way.
It's okay. It's Christmas time right now, and my in-laws are here, so I'm hiding in my office.
Actually,
but yeah,
that's something that we should mention. It's the 23rd of December, at least where I am now. I think it's the same at your place. and we're making this. This is how much we care about the industry.
That's right. No sleep for the wicked, right?
Exactly. So, Allan, I want to try to start this interview in a little bit of a different way. I've seen you posting things in podcasts and, on your social media, things from the Tim Ferriss show, and I'm not sure if you follow him. Maybe, they're just overlapping things.
We got a lot of mutual friends, yeah.
Yeah, I personally love that show, and I'm a big listener, so I want to ask you something that Tim asks some of his guests when he interviews them, which is, can you recall the first time that you got in trouble?
Again, it's such an open-ended question. So I'd say, like, I can't think of any personal, as in, like, me as a kid. Personal, when I'm trying to divide between professional and personal, I can't think of anything, because I got in, actually, I'll say this, I got in trouble all the time. Now that I think about it, I get in trouble, like, as a kid, I would spend pretty much every lunch break, I hadn't thought about it till now, but yeah, I spend, like, every lunch break pretty much in the principal's office, and I went to so many different schools, so it was, always different, but if I wasn't in there from the beginning because I was on detention, then I would get in trouble and I'd be in there, and it's just always a thing. So I don't know what that says about me, but that definitely was a thing. But I'll say, like, the one thing professionally, though, like, I look at is, I guess when I was, like, about 18 years old, I can think of one example where I was a generalist at a big studio in Australia, and I remember I got given a task. I animate, I'd blow things up, I'd do everything, but I got given a logo job. And I think that this is really valuable just because, for me, the main thing is that I would, I think I'd always go in through these steps where I would, sorry, I'm kind of stuttering a bit here because I'm trying to recall it all. I wasn't really quite thinking about it, but, like, yeah, I think basically what it came down to is that I would typically just go through the motions of doing something. It was more when someone said, "Hey, go build a logo," I'd be like, "Okay, great. Get the AI file, extrude it, bevel it, do all the necessary bits," and I would just give it back to them. And I think that this was one of those big breakthrough moments for me, because I don't think at that point I had been pretty lucky in the fact that, like, most of the time everyone's pretty impressed with the work I've been doing, and it was the first time I think that the boss, one of the guys who's been really pivotal in my career, like, he kind of gave me my first big break. He pulled me aside and he's like, "Allan, like, this is the worst logo I've ever seen in my entire career." And it was one of those things that I don't think I was very surprised by that. It wasn't like, what do you mean? It was just like, yeah, because for me, like, obviously I gave zero shits. I didn't care. It was just more like, great, I got to do a logo. There's no passion in this at all. And I think that was a moment for me that, having kind of, like, being called out on my BS of, like, look, this is reflecting the amount of care I give to this project, it made me start to think about, like, well, I should take pride in what I do. But more importantly, rather than going through the motions of just doing something, like, someone says go do something, like, a good example is someone says go make an explosion that's 20% bigger. And so you're, okay, great. And, you go into your script listener and you type in the values, and there it is. It's 20% bigger. This is exactly what you asked for. That would be kind of the mindset that I would have when I was a lot younger. And I think for me, and maybe some of us have it very early on, others, I've definitely seen artists who, they didn't kind of get that for a very long time, and it's frustrating when you're supervising and they have this issue. But I think at that point it finally made me start to, whenever I do my work, before I presented it to someone, to actually step out of my body and look at it from their perspective. And it sounds so trivial, but for me that was like a huge aha that changed everything. And it's probably one that I should have adopted very, a lot earlier on. But at that point, I wasn't doing that. I would always just kind of, you told me to do 20% or whatever, so I did 20%, instead of, hey, you know what, like, they asked for this, I made it bigger, I feel like it's too big, so maybe I'll do two versions, present them, their one and my one, and, or whatever. But you start to anticipate the feedback they're going to give, and suddenly you go through a kind of iteration loop where you go through 3 revisions that they're probably going to come back with, like, make this faster. Okay, I did. And, oh, now they're probably going to make it, want to be bigger and this, and move it to screen left. So suddenly I'm anticipating all these things, and I could get a lot quicker to final than I would if I were just waiting for them to like baby me on the next thing. And I think that little kind of mindset shift of being told like, this is the worst logo I've ever seen made me start to actually think about not what I want or what they told me to do, but instead really try to anticipate like what they want and be able to kind of take those extra steps. And I know for me now, 20 something years later as a supervisor, I'm always sitting in production meetings trying to anticipate all the things that are going to go wrong or all the bad calls people are making and be able to kind of show that in a nice way to them ahead of time, because time is money, and especially man hours more than anything. And so when it comes to people saying like, I want to do this, this, and this, I'm typically one of those people. I will grill them with more questions than they've ever been asked in their entire life when I go through a meeting. But I'm anticipating all the things that can happen, so that way I'm hoping we can get to final from the beginning in 2 or 3 versions, rather than this being an ongoing thing where we hit a wall, where like, oh, we got to go back and shit, I didn't anticipate this, and oh, this came up. And so I'm trying to always think about that. And I think that these days that's probably my biggest strength isn't skill, talent, or anything else. It's more about like I'm able to look at a project and really ask the right questions to make sure that things go smoothly. And again, when you are in a production, the most nerve-wracking thing is when things go out of control, when things pop up or artists burn out or they're not doing good work. So the more that you can streamline things and make things follow that expected schedule that you initially set out, especially 3D. I always say like anything with 3D is going to go wrong because it's just so problematic. And and I think that did kind of spawn from that small realization, at 18 or whatever, that I got to start stepping out and not only doing what I think is good or doing what I was told to do, but still really kind of look at the big picture and how we can steer it in the right direction. So maybe you end up giving like 3 different takes, which are exactly what they're going to ask. And I love those meetings too, where someone says, they look at your work and say, okay, now can you make it a little bit bigger? And you're like, okay, here's that version, I already did it. It's like, all right, but what about we make it more, like I said before, on screen left? You're like, yep, here's that version. So suddenly you got like 4 or 5 versions ready to kind of drip feed them, but you want them to make that call. And that way it's not your decision, it's theirs, and they're more likely to sign off on it. Just simple things like that, but it's something that comes from independently thinking. And again, as a junior, I think that we're so busy trying to impress everyone and tell everyone how great we are. I feel like the younger you are, the more cocky you are. And on top of that, the less you're going to listen and the less you're going to internalize what people are really saying. So, because there's plenty of times in projects where I know I want to do certain things a certain way, and then I know that the director wants to go a different way. And this isn't my vision, it's their vision. So therefore, I got to, make it theirs, and I anticipate what they want, not what I want.
Let me just interrupt you for a second, because I think that there are a couple of very important things that I want the listeners to catch. First of all, a lot of the things that you're saying, they do apply to architecture of visualization, which is
absolutely
the guys that usually watch these kind of videos. And also, it's very important to notice how such a banal question, which might seem banal, but it's not, it can actually make you realize when you had to make some sort of like important changes by yourself, by your life, even, personal life and professional life. Because one of the reasons why I love this question so much is that it makes you think about the time that you got in trouble and what you did to change that and not make it happen again, And I really like that it opened up this conversation and you started to talk for like 10 minutes. And I was like, yes, that's exactly what I was looking for.
Took me a few minutes to get my brain to boot up. My fiance actually, she whenever she asks me questions, I'm able to give her answers right away to the most complicated questions. But I have noticed if she asks me about my past, it takes me a long time to get there, because I'm one of those people, I don't live in the past. I'm always thinking about now, whereas some people I know are quite the opposite. They're always like thinking about that time and this time. And so I feel like I've got to like boot up the computer in my brain when it comes to, remember when this happened or that? So yeah, I'm always a bit slow on the start.
It's totally fine. Anyway, just, a short segue, because you've been talking about this already, but to me it would be interesting to know, how does one go into special effects?
Mm-hmm.
How
Okay,
do
so
you...
specifically
Yeah, like,
visual
for
effects,
instance,
things like that.
we were talking about it earlier. There are a lot of like architects and people that have done
Mm.
architectural visualizations, which kind of moved into that segment. Probably as an educator, you see that a lot happening. I would like for you to share your experience and talk a little bit about this.
Right. Well, I guess like yeah, you're right. We are talking about this earlier, and I think that is one of the most common areas, is people coming from archviz into visual effects. And I think it's just one of those things that we want to leverage what we have and move into an industry where maybe creatively, we can get more variety in what we're doing, and of course get to see our stuff on the big screen is always fun, and destroy rather than create. But I think for a lot of us, especially later on, there's always that roadblock of, I'm 30 now, I'm 50 now, it's too late for me, that ship has sailed. And that's always been a reoccurring thing. So I feel like there's a lot of people who are juniors who are just getting into the industry and they want to figure out, how do I get started? But then there's a lot of people later in their career who are the same, that they want to maybe change careers, but they don't want to start from scratch. They've got a lot more responsibilities as an adult. They've probably got people depending on them, a partner, kids, mortgage, all those things. So it's not as, straight cut in the way that they can just decide, hey, I'm selfishly going to change careers now. And so therefore, most of us just kind of see it as a pipe dream, the daydream that they have every day, and rather than thinking that it's something that they could actually leverage and actually do. So I think that that's like one thing that most people think is it too late? And it's probably one of the most common questions I get, is how to get started, or, is it too late for me to change careers, which essentially is the grown-up version of how to get started, the junior or the people transitioning from a different career. The thing is, like, just to segue kind of back to what you're saying, though, about, how do people get into this industry? I always say that you need to start off as a generalist and then specialize later on. And I think that comes full circle. And it's funny because I knew as soon as I ever talked publicly about that subject, you get a lot of generalists who would feel intimidated, because you're basically saying that everyone should specialize, but it's really an evolution. You start as a generalist, and bit by bit, you learn everything. You learn the entire foundations of what you're doing. Eventually you specialize, and that's how you're able to really brand yourself in a way that makes you stand out. If you're a generalist, you can stand out, but usually it's going to be to a much smaller audience. In other words, usually it's going to be at your company or in your city that you could be that rock star generalist. It's not going to be your world-renowned generalist. It just doesn't work that way, because it's not to do with like there's too many people or whatever. It's to do with more that no one knows how to categorize you, and therefore it's harder to stand out. If you were to say, I'm just Cinema 4D turbulence, FD, guy who does like amazing explosions, that instantly puts you in a category that people can associate with. And it's the same way when you apply for a job. If you say, I'm a 3D artist, then they don't know how to categorize you. They don't know which bucket to put your demo reel in. And so all of this is about compartmentalizing yourself. You want to have a sub-niche to make yourself stand out. Same thing with fitness or anything else. If you say, I'm a fitness guy, that's not going to help. But if you're like, I'm the ketogenic one-arm handstand dude, then that's a bucket. So in general, starting as a generalist, specializing, really niching down as a way to stand out and to get the right jobs and to qualify yourself beyond everyone else. But then later on, you can evolve back out to being, as you go to a supervisor, you want to get, your head back into all the departments again. And, so it ends up going through a full circle a few times. But the good thing about archviz and subjects like that is that you're essentially a generalist.
Yeah,
You're learning strong lighting. Exactly. You're learning strong lighting. You're learning modeling. You're learning layout. You're learning project management. You're learning all the necessary tools, which is why I have so many friends who come from archviz. Like, I've got a lot of friends in Michigan who come from cars or architectural visualization. And both of those go to Blur and ILM, places like that, they eat them up because they're perfect. They know how to finish shots. They know how to make things look good. They understand how to make things render on time instead of 20 hours a frame. So if anything, it's like the perfect candidate to transition into visual effects rather than someone who goes to school and learns to be an effects guy or whatever you want to be from the beginning. To me, that's like the worst of the worst. And I was really shocked when I first moved to America to kind of experience that, where I would hire someone on my team who's an effects person, and I ask them to do something that's slightly outside of effects, and they have no idea how to do it because they were trained in that one discipline. So again, the foundation is the critical part, and that's where archviz and places like that are really well-rounded for that.
Actually, do you know that architects are the ones that always push the boundaries of like software development? Like, in 3D and in rendering, the reason why render engines and 3D modeling packages are able to eat all that geometry, it's because architects, they kept pushing that. They were like, we gotta render bigger things, more grass, more whatever. And it's true, like if you ask any software developer, they'll tell you, yeah, the inputs always came from the architecture field, because the VFX guys, they'll find a way to cheat. They'll put a couple of planes with some matte painting, they'll create a beautiful landscape, and they'll do it fast because that's how you work.
Well, yeah, because you got a lock-off shot rather than like a big, you got a view from 100 different angles and everything's going to be perfectly lit. No, you're right. Like archviz and motion graphics, I feel, are two areas that really push everything. Archviz, because you're having to push so much data and nothing is not visible. Like, everything is naked and available. And with motion graphics, you're doing things that are typically outside of what the software is designed to do extensively. And because everyone's coming to you with like the weirdest thing, like I want, this kind of maglev thing that kind of turns to liquid and does some weird crap. And meanwhile, it's all taped into audio, causing it to drive the whole thing. And you got to figure out, okay, well, how do I make the software do that? Because there wasn't a button last time I checked that did that. So yeah, like, and that's just it. Like I think that you want to be pushing the boundaries. You want to, the more you do that, the better. Because I love talking about destruction and things like that. But like I remember talking with Kathleen Ruffalo over at Framestore about this. Like when they hire people, like they're not looking for people who just destroy things, because it's pretty easy at this point. Like Scanline gets a lot of those people in, but you want people who are more well-rounded. They can show that they're not going to hit a wall the minute like something's given to them that's outside of that workflow. So again, the more you can do, and that comes from the foundations of being a generalist, the better you're more stronger and confident you're going to be in those bigger requirements.
I think I have a very good question now that it's going, to... we led the way for this question. That's what I'm trying to say. I want to know a little bit about your learning curve, what has helped you to learn the tools that you learned, and also how did that go like side by side with developing your vision? Because, very often software drive the output of what you can produce, and the other way around, your vision can push the software to do certain things. So I kind of want you to expand a little bit on this, because, it will be very interesting to me to kind of understand how you can, imagine an explosion, because, somebody might say it's an explosion, that's all. But I'm like, no, there are movies when I go and watch them, I get surprised every time by, the kind of VFX and it's never the same. It's never the same, it's always changing.
Yeah, I guess in terms of learning software, things like that, I came in at an exciting time where none of this was possible. Like recently I had someone say, like, where did you go to school for 3D? And I'm like, well, there weren't schools when I started. I started in the mid-90s, and at the time, like, I couldn't even explain what I did to people. They'd be like, what is that? When Toy Story came out, finally, I could say, well, yeah, it's kind of like Toy Story and, things like that. But it meant that, there's this new blue ocean that I'm in and no one else is around, but it also meant that I had to figure out how the hell to do that. And there were, like I was on IRC, like FNet on a 3ds Max channel. And it's funny because like everyone I know who's like, basically running ILM or running Weta, running, pretty high up at Pixar, they all came from that channel. So it's just really funny. Like Marcos Fajardo, who wrote Arnold, like he'd be hanging out there. Brandon Davis, who's around a few places these days, he's in there. Jesse Hayes, who runs S2, like Savage Games. Gio Napkil, who is like the modeling supervisor at ILM. Like we're all hanging out, nerding out about this stuff, and that was just it. That was the only resource really out there. Like no one outside of it, I feel that chat room was really pushing the boundaries. So a lot of time for me, effects was interesting because you wanted to have clouds in your shot. Like we didn't have volumetrics. You didn't have a ray marcher at the time. You would have to figure out with photos and just all of it was a huge discovery. And it meant that it was all hacks, but that's why I started doing tutorials, because I loved when I spent like weeks trying to figure something out. I wanted to share that so others didn't have to go through the suffering that I went through. And that to me always kind of fascinated me, is just kind of more the, how do I do this? How do I create fire? I still have a render somewhere of some fire I made in like 3D Studio DOS, which before we had anything that could do fire, and it took like 30 hours to render one frame at 640 by 480. But I'm still proud of that. I'm still like, this doesn't look too bad. But yeah, it's just always been a challenge. So I look at that. It's always been kind of interesting. Just kind of figuring out the how, and that's kind of, I think, the curiosity of figuring out the how has always been, I think, the best way to grow, rather than just kind of following what people tell you. Try and think and do it your own. And yeah, so that's definitely been a big exploration. It's just kind of, picking up a package and just literally breaking it every way you can until you get the results that you want. And sorry, I'm going to segue for a second. Oh yeah, I was trying to get a video on YouTube. There's a new kind of show series that I'm doing at the moment called Visual Effects Case Studies, and I've wanted to do this for years, and I finally put one up, but I was wrestling with the whole copyright stuff because I had a lot of footage in there from Sony movies. So the thing is, I was talking to someone the other day about this, that I feel like I could do a case study on how I managed to get my YouTube video online without it being flagged as copyrighted. And I think that would apply exactly how I troubleshoot 3D or anything else. It's the same process. It's, figure out the obvious things of why something's not working. And if none of them work, then break everything. Save your work, then break everything until you get a result. Figure out what that is, and then work backwards until you're back where you were, but with the result still intact. So whatever it is, like 3D or anything else in life, it's the same process, but most people are get caught up in that. To segue to the other part though, about like how to make explosions or killer effects on screen, I think that again is this process. Like I always look at things these days as the finished shot, and I always have a rule that I teach in my courses, which is race to comp. In other words, as soon as you start something, you want to get it through the whole pipeline into comp, like into Nuke or Fusion or After Effects, and see how it's going to look on screen, because that's the final output. Your viewport, whatever, that's not what you're really looking at. You're looking at the finished thing. And most people, especially effects people, make that mistake. They get so bogged down trying to like make things technical and make things complicated, because then they get the brag about how I have 1,000 nodes making this one little thing. Instead of like focusing on getting to the end of the race, they're too busy showing off. And the problem with that is, like, I see it all the time when I'm supervising, that someone gets something looking really good in their viewport, and then they go to render it, and it's like it doesn't render. And he's like, I can't get this to render, and then they start working backwards, trying to dial things down until it looks really crappy just to be able to get it out, rather than focusing on getting it all the way through the pipeline. And once you've got that all working, start dialing things up to look good until you do hit those walls. So the way I work in comp, and the reason why it's important, is because if you can see it all in context in the final shot, you can see the lighting and how everything's going to work together. But more importantly, you might see, like, my eye is focused more on the left here. So I could spend 2 weeks on this thing that no one's going to notice. It's hidden behind a pillar or whatever, over here. And you start to focus and prioritize based on the final output. And more importantly, you can break things into 1,000 elements. You can do your whole effect and it looks great, but there's like one area that sucks, but you can go and just add some extra things over there, and you're looking at what you can add to a shot rather than just trying to make your pile of crap look good because you weren't really focused on the final output. So for me, the biggest thing's always been get it into comp and then dial things up rather than having to dial things down because you didn't test things out before you got there.
I really like this. I think that there is sort of like similarities also in our field, where
sure.
you see a lot of people that, they focus so much on like very often, do the right thing, right materials, right, like you find it very often with like trees. They want to have the double-sided materials working correctly. And then maybe, these things, they are very heavy on render time. And it's just because, they want to be technically correct. And sometimes, you can work with a cheat, how close is this? And I don't know, I think that sometimes what artists still fail to understand is that although there is a technical aspect to this job, this is not a technical job. It should be an artistic job, and the focus should be into, of course, making things that work, but good to look at, we don't care about the challenge of the 1,000 nodes and then, think it's broken. But anyway, I wanted to ask you, because we've been talking about it, and, you mentioned that you teach, and I also know that you work on clients projects, so I'm guessing that companies will come to you directly and ask, for services. So these are two activities that I am pretty sure take a long time from you. But one thing that I find very fascinating about the work that you do, first of all, the social media, the emails you shoot, 2 or 3 emails per week, if I don't mistake. You do a lot of social media, you make these videos, you curate your own lectures, as well as making, the special effects. I'm getting crazy just thinking about it. How do you keep like your head above the water and you don't want to jump off a building? Because, it feels like you're doing a lot of things. Can you please talk a little bit about this?
It's kind of funny because I was thinking the other day, like I'm sure someone has a course out there on how to like publish content, because I'm sure someone's figured it out, because I haven't. So yeah, I mean, you're right. Like this year has been an interesting one because I've worked really hard on just trying to figure out a few kind of protocols and SOPs, like standard operating procedures, like just trying to really make a machine out of a lot of what I'm doing to stay consistent. Because you're right, you can get very derailed. It can be very chaotic. And yesterday I was doing a lot of goal planning for next year, not specifically like go do this or go do that, but more just the theme of it, which I think is probably the more valuable part of like consistency. Like 2005, this is something I've talked about a lot, was like my year of saying no. In other words, I wanted to just start saying no to everything that came through. Sorry. I want to say no to everything that came through unless it really aligned with me. And I had so many great opportunities, like some really big celebrities and directors who were like, Allan, like I want you to be my guy for the next 3 movies that we do, and just some really amazing opportunities were coming up. But like, unless it was like 100% just like it resonated right away, then I had to always say no. And it was such a big risk, but it was because of the year before that I was saying yes to everything, and it got to a point where I felt like the quality of what I was putting out was starting to suffer. I was getting overwhelmed. I was really just wearing myself down. And the interesting thing about 2015 was that year became, I think I probably doubled my profits by turning away projects. And I've got such a notorious past of like turning down The Matrix to go work on some crappy little film, and turning down Lord of the Rings because, I only wanted to come in at the end of the film because I liked high pressure projects, not like you've got all the time in the world. And I turned down so many great opportunities to do things that weren't interesting just because maybe the day or the week before that I had agreed to something I didn't, want to do. And, so, I found that like theming your years a little bit with like what is like the one underlying thing that is more important than anything else. Not the doing, like I'm going to go and work here or whatever, but what is this year really about for me? And I think this year coming in 2019 is more about consistency. And that is that I came up with some really good ways that I was breaking down the other day. I think I'm able to put out 66 pieces of content a month through the system that I've been working all year on building. But the problem is that the minute that I get a call to go work on this movie, or I'm busy doing something else, like things can derail very quickly. So it's all about building that consistency that is easy to manage. But yeah, I haven't cracked the code. It's definitely a lot of just planning and having goals and being consistent in terms of structuring everything. I think is the biggest thing. Like I plan everything. I'm definitely a pen and paper person. I write down everything I'm doing, and I'm always planning what I'm going to do the next day. And I think it's more about routines and things like that. It's a lot of stuff that most people like roll their eyes at. They're like, oh, you do goals, or oh, you journal, or whatever. And that's always the frustrating thing, is like a lot of people will be like, if I say one of the key things is being present, in other words, like forgetting everything else going on and just focusing on this one thing, and that's the only way that you can really make headway with it, then most people are going to be like, wow, that's really woo-woo, and roll their eyes and go about their day and then freak out like they always do. So I think that the secret is just really common things that we all hear but decide that, that doesn't work. Like setting goals is stupid. And like that's mainly it. It's just been, I work in a 90-day turnaround. So rather than planning for a year of goals, what I do is I block out the things I want to accomplish in 3 months, so 90 days in a quarter. And I use, whatever note-taking system you want, but I block it out based on, if these are the things I want, it's long enough that I can pretty much get anything done, but it's short enough that I can get results quick. And I just break it down by weeks. So for instance, as we do this call, we're in week 52 of the year. So I just have a system set up where every single week is a folder, and inside of there is every single day. And of those, I just block out what I need to do, but they're all aligning to that bigger picture. But again, it's condensed enough that you can see results. Because if it's a 1 year, then you don't know if you're heading the right direction. You don't know if you're falling off. But if it's 3 months, then it's very easy to see, like, wow, I'm falling behind. I gotta speed things up this week.
I agree.
So next year is definitely like where it's more about everything I've been building on this year, getting it all to align and stay consistent. But this year's been more about trying to figure out those systems that you're talking about to actually be able to get a lot of stuff done, without just everything else getting neglected. And I've failed. I've dropped off a few times along the way, but I think I've figured out a few good systems that just work well to get a lot done.
This is so motivating and so inspiring, and also, that thing that you said about saying no to people, I can vouch for it, man. I mean, I did it in the same right time that you did in 2015. That was the year that I said, it wasn't because it was a strategy. I was just fed up with everything. And I was like, I wasn't even saying no to people. I was telling them to go themselves. I was really like mad because, you know how clients can be sometimes, hey, I have 200 euros for this. And I'm like, what? That's even offensive for you to come up to me and, ask me to work for a week for that kind of money,
Yeah, right.
So, those things, they really put me in a position of power. It seems like a stupid thing to say, but they were a game changer. And it's not like they brought me more projects. They brought better things, If you look at the bigger picture, they brought better things. A teaching job, the possibility of like growing my conference, a possibility to work with clients on different things that I was doing. And then what happened is that when I allowed myself to heal emotionally from all the shit that I was eating from my clients, then I started to become better at my art. I started, to manage projects better. I don't know. I think that sometimes people have to be a little bit more respectful of themselves. And, I just put it out there because, this is your interview, but it resonates with me so much that I really think that people should consider it sometimes,
Yeah, and I'd love to hear your insights, so don't ever feel like it's a one-way thing. But yeah, like, I'll elaborate a little bit on that because I spent that was actually one thing I spent a lot of time on this year still. I'm getting ahead of myself, but it was pricing psychology and things like that because I work a lot in marketing and other areas now, more on the business side as well as all the other stuff that I'm doing. And so that's one thing I've gotten to do some talks this year to big groups of people who are working, with a lot of big speakers and businesses. So the interesting thing, like Tim Ferriss, like we've got a lot of mutual friends just because we tend to do like speak in the same kind of groups. So, that is an example. But what I find really interesting is that when you're talking about like saying no to clients, I find that the clients who do come to you who are asking for the world for 200 euros, usually what I found is that those people are the worst clients to have because it isn't that the price is so low. It's usually more of a sign of a bigger problem, that is that they're completely out of touch of what is reasonable to get back. So in other words, someone comes to you with very little money. Most of us are afraid if we hear the concept of like saying no to something, then it's like, well, I'm going to miss out on all these opportunities. But if anything, these little things like to make $2,000, let's say to make 200,000 euros, let's say, you're going to need to, for those type of jobs, you're probably going to need to take on about 100 of them, right? To be able to make up that amount of money. And the problem is that each one of these is going to suck the life out of you. They're going to ask for so much because they're so out of touch with reality. Whereas saying no to these people, first of all, most of them aren't used to people saying no to them. So therefore, if they do come back, maybe they're going to be more open to your terms. But in addition to that, when you do get the right clients in who actually are coming to you saying, hey, I've got 50,000 euros and I want to do this project, usually they're going to be a lot more hands-off than the other one. The one that has the 200 euros, they're going to be calling you up all the time. They're going to be nagging you. They're going to be changing the whole concept the entire time because, for them, like, this is 200 euros. This is my whole life. And on top of that, they probably don't know what they want. They're very disorganized. Someone who comes with 50,000 euros, again, like, we're not all at the point where we can demand that, but usually that person is very busy. They come to you because they trust you. If they have that much money, it's because they're very successful and they've got a lot going on. What they're looking for is an output. They're looking for an outcome. They're looking for you to deliver what you agreed upon, and as long as it is that, then they're happy. Like, they're looking to tick that box because they have 1,000 more that they need to tick that week, rather than this being like their whole world of like, every day I want to check in and I get to play boss for the first time in my life or whatever it is. So I've experimented with this both with clients and coaching people with dealing with clients, but on top of that, I've also found, like, if I'm doing courses, like, my courses tend to be, very long form because I don't like the idea of like a 5-week course where just when we hit the 5th week, that's when everyone is like starting to get it, and then time's up. So I'd rather spend more time with someone and really see results. And the main thing is that I've also found that by doing that, like, if someone bought a course for $100, you're going to hear from them all day long, because they're not committed, they're not invested. The same way, like, I put out so much free content, like, all the time, and that stuff to me, I feel is very valuable, but I want to give it out for free. But that's the kind of stuff that, because it is free, you're doing a disservice to those people. They come to you saying like, this all sucks, and you didn't do it this way, and blah blah blah. Whereas like someone who's like, okay, I'm signing up for a course that's $2,000. I'm going to spend a year with Allan. Like, that's a lot of money. It isn't, $5. It's a lot of money. Therefore, you're invested. Like, you're going to get your money's worth. You're going to see to it. And I think that's the best way, is that, again, the more value you put into something, the higher caliber person, because only serious people are going to pay for a $2,000 course.
Exactly.
No one is going to pay for a $2,000 course and be like, I'll check it out sometime. And it's the same thing with clients. So sorry to go on like a big tangent about that, but like I find that the cheaper the client, the cheaper the quality of client. And the higher ticket person is usually a professional. They're going to be someone who wants great quality work, and they're also respecting you because that's why they went to you. They probably have the pick of the litter. If they're contacting you, it's because they respect you, and therefore they're going to be respectful of you.
I'm very happy that we're having this conversation. We've been bouncing from a place to another. I'm looking at the questions on the side of my screen, and I'm like, we've been touching basically everything. I mean, I still have a couple of things that I want to ask you. You're giving me way too many segues, and I'm trying to stay fixed on my track. But anyway, I just want to ask you a few more things. First of all, why did you decide to do your own thing? Although we touched a little bit on this, and I'm talking about the teaching. Also because I've asked around, people that have taken the course with you. A very good friend of mine was one of your students, and he said, by far, and I know this person very well, by far this was the best course that was ever taught, like, in terms of quality and clarity and everything. So, it made me really curious about it. And also, can you recall a big turning point in your career? And I think that these two questions, what I'm expecting is that these two questions should be related, because I think that personally I got to know you because of your teaching work. So, maybe I'm just, going out on a limb. You tell me.
Okay. So in terms of teaching, like, why is that it? Like, why do I do it? I think it's always been, I want to give back. Like, going back to what I was saying earlier about, like, when I tried to figure things out, I would spend so long trying to figure something out, I'd want to share it because I wouldn't want other people to have to discover, like, how to make a cloud or fire or whatever it would be back in the day. And so I always wanted to share, but there was also this frustration. Like, I remember there was one guy, he's a director in New York now, good guy, but like, when I was 18 at that studio I mentioned, I remember walking, he was new at the time as a motion graphics designer, and I was just being polite, so I saw something on his screen and I was like, wow, like, really cool work. How'd you do that? And I didn't really care how he did it. It was just more, I'm complimenting him and just trying to make him feel welcome. And he just kind of turns around and he's just like, why would I tell you? And it was more kind of like, why would I give away my secrets? And that kind of stuff always bothered me, because it's more like, if you're clinging on to your one or two secrets, you're not going to grow. You're not going to get very far because you're a one-trick pony. And what happens, like, I had someone recently come to me saying, like, I'm struggling with all this stuff. And I said, well, you got to be a good problem solver with anything to do with visual effects. And he's like, well, I don't want to be a problem solver. I want there to be a button that I push, and I don't have to think about it. I have to question, like, why this isn't doing what I'm doing. And rather than just like calling him an idiot or something, I want to be constructive. So it's just like, look, you can do that. You could definitely find a job where you're clicking a button and doing it every single day. But the thing is, what happens when someone else can click that button better than you? Like, your existence is out the window. You've got to evolve. Yes. And this is part of a bigger thing. But if you look at why a lot of companies, like, they do corporate retreats and they do these like workshops all the time, it's because statistically, when people leave college or school, there's only about 11% of us that continue to learn and study and grow. Most
11%.
Most of us just think, great, I'm done. I never have to pick up another book in my life. And that's the problem, is like, where's the growth? So if that's where you're set, like, this is my skill set and I never have to improve on this ever, then, other people, the people who are hungry, the people who are spending time getting up like an hour early to study and improve and learn new things, obviously they're going to evolve, they're going to grow, and you're going to stay consistent in where you are. So again, that's why I had my mailing list for the longest time. I put out videos and books and so much stuff on there because I want to reward those who are actually willing to invest in themselves. And I think for me, it's just always been like, I've been very successful in my career, but at the same time, I'm not so, especially now, I'm not so worried about my career. Like, I'm fortunate enough that I can pick and choose what I want to do. And especially now, these days, it literally is like, there's only a few jobs I want to do. And so, for instance, like, Digital Domain, or I shouldn't say it, but yeah, DD, now that I said it, like, they were pitching on Godzilla, and I'm like, all right, well, maybe I'll go work on Godzilla then. And, so at the time they're not anymore. But when there's certain projects coming up, like, that's when for me, I'm like, well, maybe I'll go do that then, because that sounds like fun. It's not necessarily, what am I going to do this week to put food on the table? And I think that, again, is where we all want to get to, is to, rather than working to live, to live to work. I'm getting dyslexic here, but rather than working to live, yeah, I'm totally screwing this up now. Live to work, we work to live. But the whole point is that, you want to get to a point where you have that comfort and freedom to do what you want, rather than having to do it every week just to get by. So that's the main thing for me, is just I felt like I hit a point where my career is fine. Every year I'm setting goals and I'm pushing myself hard to get them done, but I'm less concerned about me, but I'm more interested to see the success in other people. And like all the time now I'm having calls with a lot of my students. Like one a few weeks ago, he just moved to LA after doing a job interview, and I was coaching him on the job interview, and he's already trying to negotiate money in the interview. And I'm like, look, you're a junior, so like in his case, you can't negotiate money yet, but if you want to, here's how you can set yourself up where you'll be able to negotiate in 3 months from now. So like, let's talk about that, because that way you can do that without completely just getting kicked out of the interview for trying to demand money when you've got nothing to leverage. You can set this up in a way, and I'll walk you through it, so that way 3 months from now, they're coming to you saying, okay, well, let's talk about negotiating money. So again, I'm always trying to help other students because I'd love to see their success. And I'm more at that point happy to kind of see everyone else's growth, because I'm growing through them. I'm getting to see them get to their dream job. I'm having to see them get to move to the country they want to live in and work on the things they want to do. So yeah, I get fulfillment from that. And at the same time, it's rewarding in so many different ways.
Let me just add to this, because my commitment in the last 6-7 years was to create the D2 conference to kind of improve the life of artists. And I think that only those who experience that on their own skin, they can understand the fulfillment of like enabling people to do better and actually see the economical rewards attached to enable people to achieve success. That's why I think that what you do is so good, because I hear people saying this is the best course, and it's not surprised that you are where you are because of your commitment. So I think that if even if I haven't taken your course, I should say on behalf of those who did, thank you for being so good and consistent with this. I want to ask you one more thing before we wrap this thing up, because we've been going for an hour already.
Wow.
As I told you, it's fine. It was a lot of fun until now, and I really hope the people at home will feel the same way. There is, the learning part. There is the understanding the business side of being an artist, of being a creative, which I think you're doing an incredibly good job at, making people aware of. There is also a little bit sort of like the guidance part. Like, people sometimes need that sort of inspiration person that, to which they can say, I would like to be like that guy. Maybe there are some people watching this that are like, I want to be like Allan. To you, if you were to pick one person that you look up to as a mentor, as a inspiration, who would that be? And who would you recommend people to follow if they wanted to do the same career path that you did?
Oh man, I can't answer that at all for a lot of reasons, but as in, I don't think there's like one person. I do think that it's actually a very valid point that most people have that paralysis by analysis. They have too many, like, you go on YouTube, I think YouTube's a great place to get free resources. The problem is that, especially like 3D stuff like that, you might watch a tutorial, get 2 hours into it, and then realize like, wow, this person didn't know what he's talking about, or whatever. And then another person says conflicting information. And so in a way, like, I think it's better when you're learning something to commit to one or two people and just go all in, assuming that they have all that and you trust in them enough. But I'm not good in the sense of just having a one or two people that I like. For me, I love reading. I'm not sure if you can see. I've got like
yes.
I got bookshelves throughout this whole entire house, and even everywhere. But for me, like I I find reading really powerful. Um, and just I'm constantly doing courses. That's one thing I'll always mention to people. Like I spend probably $100,000 a year. Yeah, I'd say, you know, maybe a little over a year, but like I put in as much into myself as I'm going to put out. You know, like I'm constantly learning, constantly absorbing information, and it means that if I go for a walk, I want to listen to a podcast. Like I usually have these headphones that I forget that are even on my shoulders, and that's why I love because I just wear them all the time, and I forget they're even there. And then I'm waiting for an Uber, I just put my headphones in and listen to a lecture or something. And so I think that finding the right resources and just going all in on them is important. Me personally, I think business is just as important as being an artist. And I was talking with Aaron Sims the other day, who has Aaron Sims Creative. Pretty much every single creature you've ever seen in any recent movie is him. So trying to think of Stranger Things and even Ready Player One, like his team pretty much came up with every single character, chose every single character for Spielberg for that film. And we were talking about that, about like art and business and how they go together. I was speaking with Noelle Trio, who's over at Sony on Smurfs. She's a director there. And again, like her background in business, like most people as artists are allergic to the word business. We're like, I'm not going to work for the man. I'm an artist. I don't need to know that stuff. And the problem with that is that that's where the whole term of starving artists comes into play, because we think that we got to bleed for our art, and we get all jaded that we're getting screwed over and having to pay or get paid 200 euros a day because we think that that's the going rate, when really the more that you understand about business, the more that you can do what you want to, be passionate about it, but also still get what you're worth. And that's the thing too, is most people think that money is the only thing that you can negotiate as well. And so in general, like what we're doing, we're in a business, and most of the time, especially as a freelancer, we are our own studio. We're the artist, but we're also the manager, we're the producer, we're the IT person when our computer breaks down, we're our marketing department, we're all of these different things. And if we're solely functioning as one thing, that's like sitting in a studio and you're literally the artist, and you don't have any clients, you got nothing happening around you, and you're wondering like, who's going to manage me and who's going to look out for our future. So you need to embrace all these things. And I think that's where like the next level of artists are coming from. So Chris Do, you mentioned, is going to be, in your series. And I think that he's a great guy. Like Chris definitely, coming as a business owner and as a designer, like he's got a lot of really great insights. I think he's worthwhile speaking with always, or listening to. In terms of other people, it's tricky because there's so many out there. It's kind of funny. I'm getting an art piece commissioned right now, which is of Jay-Z, of all people. But it's funny because there's a book written by one of the authors at Forbes. He wrote about Jay-Z. It's called Empire State of Mind, and it's about all the business ventures that Jay-Z's ever done. And I originally wanted the piece just because of this one line from one of his tracks, which was, "I'm not a businessman, I'm a business man." And I thought it was just such a powerful, smart, just fucking amazing line to have. But from there, it just started making me think of, all these kind of visual reminders of things that he's done that were so applicable to everything that we're all doing in terms of marketing and branding and everything else. And so I ended up kind of expanding on that, just so that way it's just like this one big piece that, even though most people are just going to look at it and be like, oh, you listen to Jay-Z. And it's like, no, like this is a symbol of like all these little things from just one business person that's just really intelligent. But that's just it. You can find so many amazing inspirations and messages from the most random of people. So whether they're in business or whether in completely different areas, so that's just it. I think it's just about keeping an open mind, and like with everything that you're doing, just see what you can get from that. I'll say one last thing about that. I was hanging out with Chris Do's exec producer at lunch one day, and we are talking about this like Quebec guy that he's there's not many people in the world I will say are a terrible person, but this guy is. He's just it was just one of these things of like, the EP had mentioned like, oh yeah, like this guy called our office the other day asking for work, and the guy is such an arrogant person, And, it's just kind of funny because this guy I haven't spoken to or heard of in like a decade, but it was just one of those things that the exec producer like really disliked him. And I definitely had some run-ins like early in my career with this guy because he's larger than life in all the bad ways. But the main thing was that, I looked at this dude as someone who would just walk into a room and be like, I am the best at everything and you need to give me everything. And usually he would get it because most people just don't know how to respond or handle someone who's just like really, really arrogant. But what my friend Tobin was saying was like, he was kind of shocked because I was kind of complimenting this dude saying, you know what, like maybe there's something to get, like to learn from that, not to be arrogant and not to, demand all these things. But in a lot of ways, most of us are a little too courteous and we don't want to be rude. So we don't say what we want. Instead, we just hope that everyone's sidekick and will somehow read our mind and tell us like, oh, you know what, like I know you deserve this promotion that you've never, asked for once. Like usually the person who comes along and says, I want that promotion, they're the one who's going to get it. And you're going to be all upset because you expected everyone to be thinking of you when they get up every morning and go about their day. So in a way, and that's what I said to Tobin was like, maybe there's something to learn from this other guy, like not to be rude and all these other things, but, to just have the balls to actually go for what you want and actually communicate and tell people like, hey, I would love to do this. Like, what can I do to make it happen? So, I just remember him being very shocked at the time. Like, I can't believe you're complimenting him. And it's like, well, it's more about even in the worst case situations, like see what you can get from it. So when you meet someone who's just like such a terrible human being, maybe there's still something that you could learn from them and apply that without it kind of going against your code of conduct of, you want to be polite, you want to be respectful, but still respect yourself as much as everyone else.
When I did a workshop with Chris Do about a year ago in Milan, it was about overcoming objection.
Sorry, I was say I was actually hitting him up because I was in Paris at the time. I was like, dude, you're in Italy, like let's catch up. But yeah, we couldn't make it happen. But I remember him being over there.
It was incredible. I had a chance, I also got to meet Ashthorpe. I got to meet Musketon. Yeah, I got to meet quite a few people. Very good contacts with some of them. We're still talking. We're planning some stuff. It's it was an exciting time. But anyway, one of the things that I've learned from Chris though is that you gotta say what you want, and you gotta be blunt. You gotta be straight face. And when it is about asking what you want, you cannot be courteous in a way. You gotta just say it, and that's it. It's either a yes or no. Because at the end of the day, and this is, I want to expand on something that you said earlier. When a client comes with a budget that it's very low, say, 200 euros for doing something that it's, it's like a client going inside, it's like a person going inside a car shop and wanting to buy a Ferrari with, like 200 euros. You simply cannot afford it. You cannot have it. It's as simple as that, And I think that sometimes we as artists suffer and think that it's our responsibility to fix the problem of the client that cannot afford to pay more for a service. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Allan, you've been great. This was very exciting, a big learning experience also for me. And I cannot wait for people to enjoy it, and to watch it. And I really hope that everybody's going to enjoy this piece as much as I did in making it. I want to thank you for taking the time. I'll just give you the chance to say goodbye to people. Don't go anywhere.
Again, thanks so much. It's been really great opportunity to chat. And let me know when the D2 conference is on. I'd love to try and show my face there. I think it sounds really cool.
Absolutely, absolutely. You'll see, because we usually make a very big buzz about this.
That's great. Cool, man. Well, again, thank you.
You